One of the biggest challenges couples face is figuring out how to handle money together, from deciding whether to combine accounts to tackling debt to planning for big goals like retirement. Finances can be a major source of stress or a point of strength. In this episode, we'll talk about practical ways to get on the same page and build a solid financial game plan as a couple. I'm your host, Ryan, and this week I'm joined by Bob, Shaun, Nora, Nick, and Tyler. Bob, want to go ahead and get us kicked off?
Yeah, I'll give it a start. My cousin just got married recently, and it was beautiful to be at the wedding and everything, but they want to make sure they get started on the right foot financially. And I think the most important thing is to be open and talk about it, right? Like not having, it's fine to have separate accounts, right? And somebody can talk a little bit more about that if they want to, but not keeping secrets, not keeping things hidden, whether there's, credit card debt, whether there's, different things that you like to spend money on that maybe aren't the best thing. Just talk about them, be open, be honest, start out on the right foot so that you can game plan together and you can make sure you're building out a good financial future, right? Like just being open and having a conversation about it is the best first step.
I have a client that we've been meeting on a quarterly basis, and she got engaged and they're planning their wedding. And I think the important thing to note is that there's not a wrong way to approach finances when you're a couple. We have clients that like to do things separately. We have other clients that like to do things together. But the important thing is you guys are on the same page and have those hard conversations. We have clients that review a budget monthly. Does that work for them? When we meet quarterly, we really encourage clients to come, both spouses to come to that meeting so they can see what their financial plan is, fine tune, update numbers so they have a really good starting plan and can monitor that throughout our relationship.
And ultimately, it's going to depend on what age you get married. So we're seeing
Mhm.
people that get married young, right? It's a little bit easier to get on the same page because they're just trying to get by and make ends meet. But you start getting married in your mid to late 30s, early 40s. Maybe you each have your own financial advisor. You only have your own plan, and one person's doing things one way, the other person's doing things the other way. So bringing those things together can be really valuable. And oftentimes, I tell people, sometimes I feel like a marriage counselor, right? Someone wants to go and they want to get a rental property. The other person wants to put more away in their 401k. So having a third party that you can kind of bounce ideas off of is sometimes some of the most value we provide to people as we help build that financial plan and put it all in place for them.
This might be a huge hot take based on how this conversation is going already, but I'm a huge proponent of combining all finances when married.
Yes.
I just
That's
think,
what I was gonna say, Tyler. Good
in,
to
in
interrupt.
marriage, like you don't put yourself into situations where you could be tempted, right? We want to avoid
Mhm.
those situations. And when everything's out on the table, I feel like that is the true transparency. So I'm on the other side. I think combining finances fully. Now there's a unique situation, Shaun, like you touched on, but that's how my wife and I do it. That's how I usually, bring it up to clients when we're talking about
And I'll tell you too, Tyler. It's a great theory. We've seen people slice the pie lots of different ways and get it done. So, people can have separate finances and have seen some extremely successful families doing that. So there isn't a one size fits all. So there may be a theoretical approach to doing so. And when you get married younger, it's a little bit easier. You start getting married, or maybe it's your second marriage, and all
Mhm.
of a sudden things change a little bit because maybe you've been damaged or hurt and lose some trust based on a situation that happened prior. So there's so many different ways to go about doing it.
Yeah, and I think the other important part there too, Sean, you brought up second marriages, right? Like, what if there's kids from prior marriages and things like that? And that gets into, again, I think just going back to the openness of communication, right? Like understanding what are the goals for each of the individual spouses, and then potentially getting to work with different attorneys or however you need to make sure that things are clear to both sides, but also protecting each individual's interests, right? So, Tyler, yes, I think in theory it's great. Just combine everything. But I'll tell you, my wife loves having her own account that she can spend freely from, and I have no idea where it's going because then I don't get, wondering what the heck's going on. And she feels comfortable that, hey, I can kind of be in control of my own piece of the pie here.
Oh no, I still back Tyler, and he's really, I think, taking a page out of the Dave Ramsey book, right? Because that's the step one is you come together and you create the common form of communication. You're able to like actually have real conversations about money, and it's really hard to do that in silos. So I think to the extent that it's possible and makes sense outside of the extenuating circumstances, the bias or the goal should be combined accounts and finances. Now, obviously, as you get into investing in retirement accounts, like not every account is a joint account, right? Like there's, everyone has a Roth IRA or individual retirement accounts. What the I stands for in IRA. So there's still times when things are separated and not all commingled. But as far as like paying the bills and basic checking account, my bias and my bias I push on the clients is do it together.
And I think kind of the common underlying theme is communication. We've worked with people that have seen marriages destroyed because of a gambling addiction or, not communicating, right? Having that separate account and maybe pulling funds from somewhere else. Some really bad things can happen. And that's really the value of having an attorney on board. And if there is a second marriage and you had kids from the previous marriage, you want to make sure your assets go to your kids from your prior marriage. Very important to get that, a state attorney involved in that financial plan and set up what we call like a pool boy trust to make sure that your assets go to the person that you love and that your spouse doesn't go in and change them and they all go to the person they love or their kids from their first marriage. So there's a lot of different situations we need to think about. And ultimately, some of the biggest value I think that financial advisors provide is sometimes there's just one spouse in the family that's kind of doing all the finances. Sometimes it's hard for us to even get the other spouse into the office. They don't even really want to talk about it because it creates tension, and it does, right? It's one of the leading causes of divorce is finances. So when we put that financial plan in place, a lot of times it gives the spouse that has control of the finances peace of mind that if something were to happen to them, that the money's going to continue to flow to their, their spouse even after they've been deceased. So having communication, work with a financial advisor to at least talk semi-regularly with from a both spouse perspective. So everyone's on the same page, everyone feels comfortable, and everyone's putting their head on their pillow at night knowing, hey, even if something happens to one of my spouses, then I'm going to be okay and my spouse is going to be taken care
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And that, Shaun, I totally agree with you on that. And I think we all on this panel can, that as advisors, we feel that all the time, right? Like, I tell clients all the time, like, hey, listen, how you want to spend your money, all this stuff, like that's up to you. But having a communication just about where it's at, the spouse that's not as involved, once they sit down and they just see and they hear and they talk through what this money is doing and kind of why we're doing the planning or investments we are. And they're just like, okay, I get it. I know I'm taken care of. It's peace of mind across the board. It's one of the most valuable things, again, I think that we can do for being there for our clients.
There's a lot of apps out there nowadays too to help those conversations. Budgeting, cash flow apps. I think that's great. A lot of them are inexpensive. So, if you're having trouble having those conversations, maybe download one of those and go through the budget process together. And, it may help you move forward.
and understand, right? Everyone's kind of going through the same picture. So even us financial advisors, right, that are doing this, right, we still have conversations about how many Amazon packages are showing up on our front porch every day, right? Like this is going to happen to everybody, and it can, if it's not communicated, if you're not talking about it, a lot of times that financial advisor can help, right, provides a second opinion, an unbiased opinion, so that it doesn't lead to something like divorce down.
Yeah, and I think even if you do have separate, which I'm kind of on the Bob Shaun, that there's not a one size fits all, but even if you do have separate accounts, it's good to meet together and have that communication, because what is your end goal? If we have young clients, is it to buy a house? Is it, when you're reaching a retirement, what kind of retirement do you and your spouse want to live? I think it's important, even if you have different accounts, we're all going towards that same goal. Because if they're all going to do something different, you're not going to achieve what you want to in retirement or
And
before.
another thing too is we've taught educational classes, and one of the first questions we always ask people that are preparing for retirement is like, what does retirement look like to you? And sometimes that's completely different to both spouses, right? Some spouse wants to, travel the world, go to Italy. Their spouse just wants to sit in the front porch sipping sweet tea. So we've got to have some communication because we've just been working, working, working. We finally go to retire. If we haven't had those conversations, then we can't make sure you don't run out of money because each person's goals might be a little bit different.
Yep. I love when I ask that question, like, what's your goal for retirement or what's your, vision of an ideal retirement? And one spouse says something and the other one looks at him across the table and goes, I never knew that. Right. And it's like this discovery. And it's like, folks that have been married for 40 plus years, right, have had that sitting at, like across the table from me. So, I think just to wrap it all up, right, like having that open line of communication and making sure that both spouses are involved to the extent that they want to be, right? And at least understand the circumstances that they're in or their goals for each of them is the most important part to having a, successful, financial life with a spouse.
One last note before we finish up. Shaun, you must have a very handsome pool boy at your house.
I will not install a pool, and there's a reason why. You just hit the nail on the head.
It's the pool boy. It's always the pool boy.
It's always.
All right, great conversation, everyone. I think we can really come back to the theme that at the end of the day, as long as you talk about it, there's really no one size fits all. Do what makes sense for you and your spouse, but just make sure you're at least consistently talking about your finances. We're gonna hand it off to Shaun. I think he's a little angry about that pool boy. We'll see what he talks about, but we're gonna give it to Shaun as the winner of the week and let him take his 1 minute rant.
Yeah, I mean, if it's not the pool boy, it's the new dog. So we just got a brand new puppy, and make sure you're communicating about getting a new dog, because if it just shows up at the house and you got to be the one letting it out at 2:30 in the morning, as it's not sleeping, and crate training it and yapping and going to the bathroom in the house, right? It's going to create some tension in the marriage. So make sure there's communication, whether it be your finances or whether it be getting a new dog. But hopefully I love him one day. Just not there yet.
I feel you there, Shaun, for sure.
Yeah, I think we've all been through the puppy phase. That's always a tough time of life there, Shaun. I can definitely empathize with you. The last time we got a puppy, he had a UTI for like 2 weeks. We didn't realize it, so he was just peeing all over the house.
Perfect.
Sounds cheap.
Great luck with that. I hope that doesn't happen to you. But thanks for joining us for another week of Balance Your Wealth here. We look forward to seeing you guys again next week.